morning, everyone. Hey, welcome back for another Adventure Box podcast where we're going to be talking about everything history. So this is really fun. Today we're going to be talking about New Orleans, how the French took over or came to the Louisiana area, started up New Orleans. And this is amazing because I just went down there, I think about 4 or 5 months ago. So just the beginning of the year. And it was an amazing adventure. It was actually my pre-anniversary. Our anniversary, we were going to be somewhere else, so we did it a little bit early before our anniversary. But what was really great is that we got to go to all these different tours. We went to walking tours, we did bus tours, we did a steamboat tour, all these different tours to get all the history. So yes, it was about our anniversary, but I totally geeked out with all the history that was based in there. And I'm not even going to be able to share a fraction of what I learned, but I'm going to be able to share some of it. And a lot of it's in the curriculum, and a lot of it you should do your own research. So at some point, I'd love to do the history of the state of Louisiana. And just for the fact of New Orleans, but there's so many other things around that state as well. So let's get into this. But before we do, thank you so much again for Historical Conquest. They're the ones that actually provide this, give us the abilities to actually host these podcasts. And what is Historical Conquest? That what you're asking? Oh, okay. Historical Conquest is a game, much like the game of Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, Magic, but where you're playing like the game of Risk. You know, the board game, you're trying to take over the world. Every card in there is historically based. So you grab any one of these decks and you open it up. And you're going to find different people from history, depending on what you buy. You can buy starter packs, which are these larger packs. There's 50 cards in this deck. Each player needs to have their own starter pack. And then you have expansion packs. This one is actually a booster, so it's a mixture, a randomized mixture. But we have ones like the Greeks. You can't see them very well. But if you're on the podcast, it doesn't really matter, does it? Right? So this is a mixture of all world history, all different times, all different places in one box. This one is just on the Greeks. We have World War I, World War II, and so on and so forth. So thank you so much for joining us. Historical Conquest thanks you. And let's get going. Okay, so the first thing I want to mention, and I'm really excited about, is New Orleans. Now, again, we've just spent, Monday talking about the French coming into the New World and colonizing up north, Montreal, Quebec, and Detroit. Well, funny enough, they didn't just stop there. Like, we know them as Canada because you have a lot of French-speaking Canadians. But we also have a large population of French speakers where? In the United States, in New Orleans. It's gone away a lot, but there's actually still a fairly good amount of people living down there. Have you ever heard of the name, the type of people called Creole or Cajun? Look them up in our curriculum. We go through the history of how they're called the Creole or the Cajun. I'm not going to spoil it just because, again, there's so much I want to share with you today. So let's get into this. Okay, so early French exploration and colonization. As you know, they're already up north in Quebec, Montreal, and such. Well, there's another set of explorers around 1673. This is all when Montreal and Quebec are already established. Well, they come down and they navigate the Mississippi River. So these French explorers are navigating the Mississippi River and identify a potential place for French interests in North America. Now remember, they want to be able to float furs instead of carrying them out or partially sailing them and then getting off the boat, walking down to the next lake, going through the Great Lakes into St. Lawrence River. Instead of doing that, they're like, well, there's got to be a better way of floating them down from Detroit and from the northern area, so Canada, floating them down and coming to where? Coming to New Orleans. And that's where the coast is. And that's where the ships can come in and you can actually load the ships with the goods that you find on the river or above the river up in the north. And so everyone was really excited about this. Hey, this is a great place. Mississippi River. Everyone learn about the Mississippi River. This is what they're saying. So they're bringing this information back. That's 1699. 1701, 2 years later. the French established Fort Louis de la Louisiane. And I probably butchered that, sorry. It's near Mobile Bay to secure the French claims against the Spanish and the British on the Mississippi River. Again, they just mapped out the Mississippi River, so they know it goes from north of the United States, or what is now the United States, down to Louisiana, and this place they're about to call New Orleans. Well, also interesting to know is that when you are floating, you don't need a sailboat. The tides go so strong in the Mississippi River, you're basically being launched down there. They go quite quickly. Put some extra, put a sail on or something like that, and you're rocketing down there. You'll get down there fairly fast, within a few days. Okay, so that's 1701. They established Fort Louisiana de la, Fort Louis de Louisiana, near Mobile Bay. Now this is actually claiming the area, but it's not New Orleans. 1717, the French crown grants control of Louisiana to the Company. I love how they said it. The Company of the Indies. So under John Law's economic scheme, this is John Law and his company, the Company, was responsible for populating this colony that they're just starting up. Okay. So you have a lot of people with French names, and I'm not going to try to pronounce their names. I apologize. Jean-Baptiste la Moyne, and then another Bienville. So those two, again, I'm not going to try to, founded the city of New Orleans, named it after the Duke of Orleans, who was a French regent. Another political person that's actually given them influence in France while they're down in Louisiana. So this site was chosen as a strategic place, but the surroundings are swampy land and not just flood risk. I mean, they're literally flooded a lot. Every year they're flooded. So New Orleans is known for being flooded. If you might remember, there was Hurricane, what's that? That's right, Katrina. Now, New Orleans has actually, they established it. This is very interesting. They established it and it's like sea level. I'll show you a picture in just a few minutes, but it's sea level. Over the years, they put so much weight on that sea that it's actually sunk feet below sea level. So it's like slowly going down. Probably not anymore, but at that point it was, because there's, I mean, you're putting concrete, you're putting all these heavy things on this land that was not, that's a swampy land. All the swampiness underneath it pushes all the water out. The more weight you put on it, the more water gets pushed out of it. And so when Hurricane Katrina went through in the late 90s, it swamped everything. And then a lot of people died. And they should have been more well prepared because they live in this. Well, those in France were sending people over in small amounts. Now, New Orleans became the capital of French Louisiana in 1722. This shifted a lot of the reasoning for Louisiana, the supplies that were coming in. It also sent ships with enslaved Africans to be brought into developing the city. So let me show you a picture. Actually, you know what? Let me show you a map first. I love showing you the map because it gives you a better understanding of where it is. Okay, so you come out. If you're on the podcast, don't worry about it. We're just showing a map of the United States. Come down to Louisiana. It's the boot on the bottom of the man. So Minnesota, Iowa, Missouri, Arkansas, and Louisiana is the man, basically marking halfway between the two. Yeah, I mean, somewhat halfway. Louisiana is the boot. You come down to the boot, and it's hard to miss it. You got the Mississippi River winding its way through, and it goes past Baton Rouge, and just as it's about to hit the ocean, you have New Orleans. That, my friends, is New Orleans. And this is a lake, not the Mississippi River. Where is the Mississippi River from this point? Okay, so let's see. Mississippi River. Yes? No? Yes! That is the Mississippi River. and it winds right through New Orleans, like dramatically right through. New Orleans is on both sides of the Mississippi River. So I visited down here. We stayed up, I think, around here, and we went swamp exploring over here. If you have a chance, oh, definitely go on their swamp tours. You can see alligators and all these other things, wild hogs out in this area. This is a national park, so no one can hunt or, well, yeah. There's some stories that the alligator hunters can tell you. Because they're not allowed to feed the alligators, they're only allowed to feed them marshmallows. That's right. So they feed them marshmallows to get them closer to the boats so they can show them off. And they have names for them, and they have stories for them, and it's a great little experience. But this area is very much full of swamp and a lot of alligators. So people were dying. You know what it also had? It had disease there. There was a lot of disease in that area. Okay, so let's go through this. So let me bring up my picture. First picture, there we go. This was Louisiana as it was first mapped with the Mississippi River. Now the Mississippi River, it's not that easy. It's a little bit more out of the way. But you go to the next picture. This is the start of New Orleans back in 1798. Now remember, they started this around 1722. That's when it became the capital. And that's what they had built by 1722. Or sorry, 1798. So each of these squares inside this map are actually blocks. So it's not just one house, it's a massive amount of houses. And as you can see, they built a wall around New Orleans in order to keep them safe from either Native Americans on land or people coming from the ocean as well. But here's an interesting thing. So if I'm reading this correctly, I think this is actually flipped. This is like upside down. I can't really say that it is. So yeah, this gives you a better understanding of those blocks that were created, and the ships would park outside. So this was only on one side of the Mississippi River, is how they actually designed New Orleans. And then it grew. It expanded quite quickly from there. And I'm actually going to show you how fast it actually expanded. So this is 1728. Oh, there you go. So this is 1728. This is around the time when it becomes the capital. Pretty much what I showed before without the walls around it. Now, as you can see, I think these are actually forts. There's forts in different areas to protect if it's attacked by land. But also with it being swamp, there weren't Native Americans in that area. They didn't like the swamp area. They didn't need to be there. There was a hunting ground. That was a migrating ground, but it was not an actual place where they actually stayed. So, come 1731. Oh, sorry, actually, I should mention, this is the map for 1728. 5 years before, there was a hurricane that came in. It struck New Orleans and destroyed many, if not most, of the early structures. But the city was soon rebuilt. And again, as you can see, within 5 years, it was built pretty strong. So, and then, well, we'll get to that one. Okay, so let's keep going. Control of Louisiana averted to the French crown after the fail of the company. So the company in 1731 basically failed. They couldn't get the furs out and everything managed, just couldn't do it. So 1731, France takes it back over. Now this is interesting. This is quite interesting. We had a fun time listening to this. So let's see. You have French explorers, of course. Most of them are going to be men, right? So you have French explorers. They're very prim and proper when they're around their lady folk and in France. Come out to the settlement, they can't really be prim and proper because it's a swamp. And so they come out, and there's a lot of guys out there and very little women, because women did not want to travel out there unless they were going with their husbands. So that being said, I'll come right back to that. 1734. This is called the Ursuline nuns arrived to establish their first convent and Catholic school, aided to help the growth of the Catholic community. Men, these are nuns. They are not for you. Do not touch them. So But that being said, the men are like, what are we supposed to do? How are we supposed to have children? I'm going back to France. And they would literally, they were threatening to go back to France, to leave New Orleans, not establish it, and be gone because there's no women there. They wanted to get married. They wanted to start up families. They want other things. There you go. So what happened? Well, with that, and with the construction of the new fort, again, more soldiers coming in, but not more women coming in. I think it was around 1743. Bienville, often called the father of New Orleans, retired as governor, ending the era of early French leadership. Okay. What happened during this time? Well, France is still in control. They have been in control for a little while, and I'm not exactly sure when this exactly happened, but the Frenchmen were very dissatisfied with the little amount of women, and they said, France, you either get us some women or we're coming back, and you won't like us coming back because we picked up some nasty habits. France is like, yeah, we could do that. Yes. The king said, yes, we will make sure that you have some women. So the first batch of women they sent back were criminals, orphans, women of ill repute, women that basically didn't have a place to go, debts. So those that have debts, those type of things, they were shipped over. You know how long it takes to get from France to New Orleans? Like a month or more. And those women, because they were women, could not go up on deck, so they could not see the sun. So it paled their skin. Well, what else did it do? It didn't just pale their skin. It made them very much lethargic, very much riddled with disease in the sense of like scurvy. I mean, so much that your face gets sunken in and you start talking like this. Just kidding. But like your face gets sunken in, your eye sockets start popping out, those type of things. Also, it creates a jaundiced look, so you have like a yellow or orangish skin color. So you're pale and have this look on you. And these women come off the boat and people scream because they look like the Walking Dead. So the nuns say, whoa, hold on a minute. They grab those women, they bring them in the convent, they nurse them back to health. And yeah, those women are suffering because of what they just went through, but they're able to be introduced into the community. Okay, so at the same time, there's also a second group of women that come by. So they say, we need more women because that was not enough women. And that was pretty scary when they showed up on the out of the ship. We need more women. France is like, okay, we can send you more women. And they're like, well, we don't want criminals. We don't want orphans. We won't want women of our true. Okay, maybe we won't want those. I mean, they were men. And they were during colonial times. And I'm not going to judge them. Though in my head, I'm judging them completely. Okay, so either way. So all of a sudden, there are another set of women that are trying to be gathered together. Well, okay, so here's the thing. Proper French women would not be caught dead on one of these ships unless, again, their husband was bringing them over and such. And their fathers weren't going to give them to men they had no clue about because they loved their daughters. So they sent over another set. But these ones, they actually had to pay. These people, they had their dowry set up so to actually give them money to last when they were finding a spouse to take care of them and also help the spouse. So this was a dowry. When you get married, a lot of times there was a tradition of having a dowry where one of the spouses would actually provide the other spouse with money, or even the family of that of them. So this other group comes by. Well, they give all of these people these boxes, these crates, these trunks, and have them carry it, and it carries all their earthly possessions. So they get here and they have the same issue. Jaundice, sunken in faces, scurvy, but not as bad as it was before because they learned something this time. But they're still bad. So the nuns take them automatically. Actually, at night, if I remember correctly, they took them at night because they didn't want people to see them. Because again, they didn't want them to freak out. Well, here's an interesting thing. What would you say, and people got word of this, what would you say if you saw someone dragging a trunk that was the size of a person? They looked like the Walking Dead. They almost like looked like caskets. Oh my word. And something else to know is that they were actually called the cassette girls, not the casket girls. Or casket women, casket ladies. Ah, I forgot. But it's in the curriculum. So they were actually called the cassette girls, or cassette women, again. But that didn't translate very well because everyone started saying the casket girls. And all of a sudden, the rumors went around town that they were bringing in vampires. Who's going to marry a vampire? Well, they put them in the convent, and not many people wanted to marry these ones. Plus, these were a little bit more proper women, and they did not want to go with just anybody. So they would go out, they would go party, they'd do things. They got a little bit older, so it was not in the age of being married. So they'd go out and do things, and then they return to the convent at night. Sometimes when there was a woman that found a man who was being a little bit too touchy, then supposedly that man would disappear. He'd walk them to the convent, and then would disappear. Ah! So there's a lot of rumors down in New Orleans about murders, ghosts, vampires, witches, those type of things. Quite interesting because I went on this paranormal adventure because it was a free one, and we're like, sure, why not? It's quite interesting. We had a really good fun time because the guy that was giving us the tour was actually a professor of history. So I had a lot of asking him questions that were some related, some not related. So yeah. Okay, so then in 1762, what happened? The Treaty of Fontainebleau. So this secretly transitioned Louisiana to Spain. Sorry, from France, Louisiana to Spain. Yeah. This basically made it so that, remember what was happening with the French during this time? We haven't gone over it yet. This was during the French Revolution. Sorry, not the French Revolution. What am I thinking? French and Indian War. So the French and Indian War ended around 1762. 1761 or 1760. One of those. Well, the French and Indian War ended officially with the Treaty of Paris, where the French gave basically everything that they owned in the Americas to, including Canada, to the British. The British. And so they, in order to keep them from grabbing Louisiana, they gave it to the Spanish. So when they came to, hey, we want New Orleans, it's like, nope, sorry, that's not ours. That's the Spanish. Sorry, we don't own that. So, French forces led by Alejandro O'Reilly. So Spanish. That sounds English. O'Reilly. O'Reilly. I don't know. Anyways, arrived to enforce Spanish authority. And this is actually which officially ended the French rule of Louisiana. So even though they owned it, the Spanish owned it, it took them 7 years to actually come in and take possession of it. This actually drove a lot of other questionable things that were happening in New Orleans. So one interesting thing, though, is it's called the Spanish Quarter. So this area was actually French quarters. So this was an area that was very French architecture. Everything was great. And then a fire hit New Orleans and burned down everything. So when they rebuilt, it was the Spanish that owned it. So they built it back in the Spanish style. And so that was great. The Spanish liked their new place. They had the French Quarter, which even up to today, you still have the French Quarter. The houses have not been modernized. It actually looks like it was back 100 years ago. Quite fascinating. Okay, so then let's go on to another establishment. So at this point, the French have all their influence up above Detroit and such, and they have all these little communities that are providing fur down the Mississippi River. And what happens? Oh no, the Spanish took over. Well, with the Spanish taking over, they didn't just say, well, we're still going to let you funnel your furs through. No, no, no. This is more of a, you're going to have to pay us. We got a tax for you for every fur that comes down. It's like, wait, we didn't talk about that a few years ago when we did the Treaty of Fontainebleau. And they said, well, things change, you know, it just happens. So there was a French explorer. His name was Pierre Laclede, whatever. A French fur trapper who worked in New Orleans for a New Orleans-based trading company. So in that, he was given permission to establish a new trading post on the west bank of the Mississippi. Well, so you travel up the Mississippi, everything to the east was now belonged by who? The British. Everything to the west of the Mississippi was open property. Basically, the French claimed it, the Spanish claimed it, everyone claimed it, but it's basically open property. So Pierre comes around and says, I'm going to establish a new trading post for my company on the west bank of Mississippi where it's not as much claimed. Oh, actually, you know what? Let me finish up these pictures. So going back to New Orleans, because we're still there, right? We could bring this in afterwards, but let's show the picture so I can get to the new ones. This is New Orleans in 1879. You see how much it's expanded since we showed it? And that's where it is in 1900. And again, if I bring up my map, that's how it is right now. Again, you're just seeing about like right there. That's where it is right now, all the way up to Baton Rouge and such. So yeah, it's quite amazing. Okay, so let me bring up the pictures again. And this is a picture of it at ground level, at sea level. So all those ships, if that river floods, which it does a lot, the Mississippi River, it's going to flood that land. Oh, one other thing. Now, this is another cool story that I learned about. Okay, have you ever heard of yellow fever? Yellow fever was a disease that basically it would kill you, but it didn't have to kill you. It could actually just like bring your heartbeat down to a very low beat, so much that someone put their finger up in the carotid artery, try to feel around your pulse. They couldn't find it. Nope, they couldn't find it. You must be dead. And they started burying these people. Well, then they found out one day that yellow fever, those people aren't dead. They could actually be revived, or they could wake up, basically. And so they had to go back and break all the burial chambers that they have. If you see this picture, you'll see what I'm talking about. But there's like a wall of where you put your casket in. Why'd they do that? Because they had to get rid of those with yellow fever as fast as possible because they didn't want the disease to pass. So they were putting these people in these walls, again, above water level because you couldn't put bodies down deep because you're at sea level. You're at ocean level. So they built all their cemeteries above ground. Well, and they put these caskets in these walls because they didn't have space enough for them, and they couldn't build the tombs fast enough for them. So they started mass producing these walls. When they found out this was happening, they all of a sudden had to break open the caskets, make sure you were still alive or still dead, then put you back into the casket, and they would feed a line into your coffin. On the end of the line, outside of that box, you have a bell. Because if you wake up and you're stuck in a coffin, you're gonna freak, right? Yeah. And so these people grab that line and start ringing the bell. And literally, you could say you were saved by the bell. Okay, but with that, they actually had night watchmen walking around listening for bells ringing. And they actually found dozens of dead people that were buried that had to be rescued, and pretty darn fast, because if you're in a casket, those are not airtight, but they get very, very airtight when it comes to using up your air um, if you're panicking. So yeah, now let's go back to St. Louis. Okay, so St. Louis. Actually, I'm going to show you a map of St. Louis. So this is New Orleans. We're going up the Mississippi River, coming here to St. Louis. As you can see, St. Louis is on the west bank of the Mississippi River. So they start building here. Everything's going great. Pierre loves this. Now, interesting enough, well, it's actually within a year they started clearing the land, but they had another problem that came up. Okay, so they actually named St. Louis after King Louis the Ninth of France. That was who was in power at the time. Okay, so they had a problem that was going on. They were starting up this fur post, but they had to get all their furs into Louisiana to be taxed and then ship them out on a ship. So again, you can't take a ship that's going down the Mississippi River and put it into the open ocean. Different kinds of ships. So you had to unload your stuff, get it taxed, get it through customs, Spanish customs, and put on a new ship. Well, there started to be a black market down there. And with that black market, if you could pad someone's pocket or give them enough cash, they'd make it slide that no one would find out about you. Well, then they come to find out, the government found out about it, and those people that were taking money were the ones fined, and the Spanish cracked down on the illegal market of the fur trade. But funny enough, they weren't selling the furs in the United States or in Louisiana. No, they were shipping back to France. They just had to get them past the Spanish to get them out there. Okay, so ongoing. Now you have St. Louis established. It's a major hub. This small settlement is thriving by 1765, which remember, they founded it 1762. They just found that they wanted to build a post on the west side, so 1762. Probably actually starting this real establishment around 1763. Within 2 years, it was a flourishing post. It had traders, it had settlers, it had Native Americans. They were all trading with the French, and they would float their goods down the river. So St. Louis grew as one of the fastest hubs for fur trade anywhere, because you had everyone coming to this place. You had, again, the British on the east side of the Mississippi, French on the west side. All the British had to do is go over to the west side, pick up some furs, bring them back. They didn't have to go through Spain. Just saying. Okay, so although St. Louis was officially under Spanish rule starting in 1766, again, the Spanish claimed that area, so it was somewhat under the Spanish rule, because in the treaty they basically give them everything east of the Mississippi, so that the British couldn't take it. At the same time, they were hoping they could keep a hold of it. So this made St. Louis culturally distinct. And there was a lot of Spanish influence. There was a lot of French influence. French influence. Yeah, Spanish influence and such. So now, well, I'm just going to leave it to look it up in the curriculum. I'm running out of time, so I'm going to run to the next place is South America. Okay, so let's see. South America. Okay, with South America, I don't have much on this just because it's such a small amount of the history. Oh, here's some more New Orleans architecture. Oh, and this is St. Louis. St. Louis. What was I showing you before? Oh, I wasn't showing you anything. Yeah, this is St. Louis on the west side of the Mississippi. And there you go. There's some pictures of them exploring it. And that's where it was in 1859. So it grew very quickly. And as you can see, the steamboats, it's because you couldn't just sail up or down. You could drift down, barges. They have barges that drift down, but you have to be able to climb it through steamboats. So St. Louis is actually one of those cities that really got the steamboat popular. But that's another time for another place for another time. Okay, South America. Here we go. There's one place that basically the French own in South America, and that is French uh, Jean. Oh man, let me see. Wait a second. I had to get a little translation there. French Guiana. So French Guiana is this little part right here. Now, why is that significant? Well, if you remember when we were talking about the Portuguese had all of Brazil. The Portuguese had all of this area taken over, but then other countries started taking their part. You had the Spanish that were there, you had the British that were there, the Dutch, overseas Department of France, so the French, and you had the Portuguese in Amapa, 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 whatever. So French Guiana is a colony that was started way back. Let's go back to 1604. So this is about the time when they're starting to look at establishing Montreal or Quebec City. They don't actually do it at this point, but a French explorer attempts to establish a settlement in Guyana region, but basically through harsh conditions, conflict with the indigenous people, he doesn't make it. So it takes him 39 years later, 1643. Now they have established Quebec. So again, remember what was happening with France. France was the French king was actually taken by the Spanish as captive, and this is when the French sided with the Ottoman Empire. The Spanish and the Portuguese did not, or I think it was the Spanish and Italy, the Byzantine Empire, basically came up and said, we don't like how you're doing things. And so, yeah, this is why there was such a big break between the exploration of the 1500s and the 1600s. Okay, so 1643, a French colony is established at this point in French Guiana. So they have initially taken over that area, but they had other challenges such as tropical diseases, and they still had the local tribes trying to kill them, which makes sense because they're invading their land. That was 1643. That's when they started the colony. Now, 1664, the French West India Company took over French Guiana, attempting to establish a sugar plantation, but the harsh conditions and the lack of labor made it very difficult for them. So they didn't do it. So they basically failed. I know that they kept going, but it basically failing. But 1763, following the 7 Years' War, France renewed interest in Guyana, encouraging settlers from France, especially soldiers. So again, they still battled disease. They still had the indigenous people, and it was a higher mortality rate among settlers. That was 1764. So they're still going. And during the 20 years where they're waiting for the after the 7 Years' War, they still have people living there. So what happens? Okay, so then you have the development and the Napoleonic War, French Revolution. Remember, 1809. During the Napoleonic War, British and Portuguese forces, the forces from them, occupied French Guiana as part of a broader campaign against France. So, what happened? That was 1809. By 1814, French Guiana was then returned to France during the Treaty of Paris. So, okay, so the British pushed them out, and then there was another Treaty of Paris. How many treaties of Paris are there? Let me ask Google, because that actually very much interests me. How many treaties of Paris were there? So we're going to get a list of these. Okay, now that's good to know. All those things were happening with French Guiana. Now, what happened to really get them established? Okay, 1852, the French government establishes a penal colony. Do you know what a penal colony is? It was known as Devil's Island to house political prisoners and criminals. So a penal colony is a penalty colony. And it remained active all the way until 1953, 100 years. And this was infamous for its brutal conditions. Now, do you remember the, what is it? Monte Carlo. So there's a movie, early 2000, the something of Monte Carlo, not the Cross of Monte Carlo, something of Monte Carlo. If you want, I can email it to you. But it's a great movie, but it shows the brutality of their prisons. It is fictional, but it's based on the brutality. So you know this is pretty bad. That was happening in 1852. Well, the next big event was 1886, when they discovered gold. And so that sparked a small-scale gold rush, an influx of miners from France to come over and mine that area. Now, as you know, all those other areas, the reason why there's so many of these countries in this small amount of area is because they all had the same thing. They all found gold. Okay, so modern day, well, you know what? I'm not going to do modern day for Guyana, French Guyana. I'm going to leave it at that, actually. I know I've already gone over 40 minutes, so read it in your curriculum, look it up. There's so much more to this area. I wish I had time to do it, but stay tuned for more. Again, this is Wednesday, so next Monday, we're going to start talking about some things you're going to really like. And actually, let me grab my list over here. So the next we're actually going to be talking about is, is this the British? I think we already went over the British. So this is actually supposed to be, so give me 1 second. Yeah, so if this is going back, Spanish. Yeah, we already did the English. Okay, Spanish. No, actually we didn't. Yes, we did. So if that's true, this is really great. You're going to love this. We're going to be heading off to the French and Indian War. Now that we've talked about the French, now get ready to learn about their war against Britain and the Native American influence and everything. Again, this is what I say. This is one of the most pivotal moments in American history that no one ever talks about. Yes, the American Revolution is the most pivotal moment, but the French and Indian War is actually what leads up to that. So stay tuned for that for next Monday and Wednesday. And in the next month. As for tomorrow, get ready because we're going to be talking about the Greeks taking over Egypt. So that's also going to be fun. If you're learning about ancient civilizations, stay tuned for that. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will catch you next time. Take care and have a great day. Bye. If you have any comments or questions, add them to the comments below. Otherwise, we'll see you tomorrow, actually. Take care. Bye.